"You're a disappointment." My father's words weren't a whispered aside or a frustrated sigh. They were bellowed across the reception hall, ringing out over the soft jazz music and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses at my sister's wedding. He didn't just say it. He performed the humiliation. I was standing next to the enormous, multi-tiered wedding cake, a masterpiece of sugar and icing that probably cost more than my annual rent, when he grabbed the microphone from the best man, who had just finished a genuinely kind toast. My sister, Clara, looked radiant in her $15,000 gown, marrying a man who owned 3 successful tech startups. Everyone was happy, everyone was rich, and then there was me, wearing a suit I'd rented just for the occasion. Dad, slightly slurring his words from too much top-shelf scotch, stared directly at me, his face tight with contempt. "I want to propose one final toast," he announced to the several hundred guests who were suddenly silent. "To my 2 children, to Clara, who is brilliant, beautiful, and a success in every way a daughter should be. She has married a man worthy of the Sterling name, and to my son, Michael, I wish you well, son, but let's be honest, you're a disappointment." He then dropped the microphone literally and walked away, leaving a sound engineer scrambling to catch it before it hit the floor. The silence that followed was thick, toxic, and utterly unforgettable. The entire room turned to look at me. Clara was crying, not out of sympathy for me, but out of embarrassment for herself. Her new husband looked faintly annoyed, and I just stood there, mortified, the entire weight of my father's decades-long disapproval crushing me in public. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. He died 6 months later. And then, despite that public, cruel dismissal, he did the unthinkable, he left me everything. Tell me, honestly, would you have accepted a multi-million-dollar inheritance from the man who used his final public act to shatter your confidence? Because I'm still questioning whether taking that money was the ultimate victory or the ultimate capitulation. To truly grasp the bitterness of that wedding night and the baffling irony of the will, you have to understand the dynamic of the Sterling family, or rather, the dynamic between my father, Richard Sterling, and me. Richard Sterling was a self-made titan of industry. He didn't build a real estate empire like some stories. He built a manufacturing empire: precision tools, industrial robotics, the kind of boring, specialized business that makes astonishing amount of money. He believed in hard numbers, quantifiable success, and aggressive profit margins. He believed in Clara because Clara was a reflection of him. She got a degree in finance, worked in investment banking, and married an entrepreneur. She was a predictable, high-performing asset. And then there was me. I went to art school. I majored in philosophy. I taught high school English and spent my evenings writing poetry that no one read. I lived in a small, slightly run-down apartment in the city and drove a 12-year-old car. I was happy, deeply fulfilled by my life, but in my father's eyes, I was worse than a failure. I was an active rejection of the Sterling legacy. His contempt was constant. It wasn't always loud. Mostly, it was a quiet, cold judgment, a look, a sigh, a pointed question about my student loan debt, which was actually quite manageable. Every family dinner was a performance where Clara's accomplishments were read aloud like a corporate annual report, and my contributions were met with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Oh, Michael's busy molding young minds," he'd scoff, implying I was wasting mine. He even paid for Clara's entire master's program and bought her first condo, but when I asked for a small loan to replace my failing transmission, he sent me a 50-page printout titled, "The Value of Personal Responsibility and fiscal discipline, along with a $50 gift card to a chain oil change service. The resentment was a living thing in our family, mostly because he made it clear I was a parasite draining his oxygen. My mother, bless her soul, was the only buffer. She passed away 5 years ago, and with her gone, my relationship with Dad became purely transactional, revolving around obligatory holiday appearances where he could renew his public disdain for my life choices. That brings us back to Clara's wedding. It was the culmination of his life's work. A beautiful daughter, married into a family even richer than ours, cementing the Sterling name's place in the financial elite. My presence was simply a requirement, a loose end he needed to tie off with a final, cutting statement. After he humiliated me, I didn't cause a scene. I walked out, got into my beat-up sedan, and drove 500 miles back to my small apartment, never looking back. I cut contact completely. I didn't answer his calls or reply to his few terse, unsympathetic emails. 6 months later, I got a call not from Clara, but from the family attorney, informing me my father had died suddenly of a massive heart attack. The attorney was Mr. Harrison, a sharp, humorless man who had served the Sterling family for 40 years. I flew back for the funeral, dreading the inevitable encounter with Clara and her husband. The funeral was exactly as you'd imagine: tasteful, expensive, and filled with cold condolences. Clara was distraught, but again, her grief seemed laced with concern over the logistics of the estate. Then came the will reading. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with the anticipation of inherited wealth. Clara sat opposite me, her face pale, her husband gripping her hand, their eyes fixed on Mr. Harrison. I, honestly, expected nothing. Maybe a small token, or perhaps a final cruel note written into the margins. Mr. Harrison began to read the last will and testament of Richard Sterling. He detailed the minor bequests, small trusts for extended family and staff, and then got to the core of the estate: Sterling Robotics and Manufacturing, the massive real estate holdings, investment portfolios, the liquid cash. I braced myself for Clara's name. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat, adjusting his reading glasses. To my daughter, Clara Sterling. He paused, and Clara leaned forward, already mentally renovating her third home. I leave the sum of $100,000 tax-free. The shock in the room was palpable. Clara gasped, her husband's jaw dropping. $100,000. A mere rounding error compared to the hundreds of millions the estate was worth. Mr. Harrison continued, and the remainder of my estate, including 100% ownership of Sterling Robotics and Manufacturing, all real property, and the entirety of my investment and liquid assets, I leave to my son, Michael Sterling. The room spun. Clara screamed. Her husband shot out of his chair, sputtering legal jargon. I, the proclaimed disappointment, the starving artist, the disgrace, was suddenly the sole owner of a multi-million-dollar corporation. I was numb. Clara immediately accused me of manipulating Dad in his final days, despite the fact I hadn't spoken to him in 6 months. Her husband threatened immediate litigation, but Mr. Harrison, calm as a glacier, simply presented the documents. The will was ironclad, signed, witnessed, and recently updated just 4 months after Clara's wedding. The public humiliation at the wedding was Dad's last act of cruelty towards me, but the will was his last act of what? Revenge against Clara, a morbid joke on me, or maybe, just maybe, a twisted admission of respect. That question haunted me. The inheritance was a staggering burden. It represented everything I had spent my adult life running away from: corporate suits, profit margins, and a life measured by wealth, not fulfillment. Yet, Accepting it meant I could finally, truly stick it to the people who had always treated me with contempt, especially Clara and her grasping husband. The idea of walking away, giving up my entire birthright, simply because the man who gave it to me was a monster, felt almost equally unsatisfying. So that's the situation I was in. I was sitting on a mountain of wealth, property, and a manufacturing company I knew absolutely nothing about, gifted to me by the person who had spent his life publicly despising my existence. I had two clear paths: walk away from the toxicity and the money, returning to my simple, happy life, or embrace the financial power and wield it, for justice or for pure spite. Before I tell you what happened next, and the calculated, long-term decision I made about the sterling legacy, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have played the long game, using the wealth to get the ultimate revenge? Or would you have walked away from the trauma and the temptation of millions? Let me know, because my choice defined the next chapter of my life. I spent the next 2 weeks wrestling with the decision. The litigation Clara's husband threatened was aggressive, but Mr. Harrison assured me the will was unassailable. My lawyer, however, cautioned that if I appeared completely indifferent to the company, it would give Clara and her team ammunition to argue I was incompetent and should be replaced by a corporate trustee, which they would control. I realized that walking away wasn't an option if I wanted to prevent Clara and her husband from eventually seizing control of the business my grandfather, Dad's father, had originally founded. My father's true purpose became clearer. He hadn't left me the money because he loved me. He left me the company because he knew I was the only person in the family who genuinely didn't care about it, and therefore, I was the only person who couldn't be controlled by it. He knew Clara and her husband would be poisoned by its lure. His final, brilliant, and deeply flawed move was to use the company as a poison pill, a weapon wielded by his supposed disappointment. So, I made my decision. I wasn't just going to take the company, I was going to run it, but on my own terms. My first act was to retain Mr. Harrison, whose loyalty was to the estate's stability, and hire a top-tier corporate operations manager to handle the day-to-day logistics of Sterling Robotics, a man who appreciated my philosophical approach to management, believing that happy, fulfilled employees led to better results, the absolute antithesis of my father's ruthless style. My second act was dealing with Clara. Her litigation was going nowhere, and she was desperate. She scheduled a meeting with me, bringing her husband, who spent the first 10 minutes arguing that the will was clearly written while Dad was having a mental break. I sat back and let them vent. When they finally paused, I leaned forward and delivered my only statement, quoting Dad's own words from the wedding. "I wish you well, Clara, but let's be honest." I paused, looking directly at her husband. The Sterling legacy is clearly not meant for the grasping and the greedy. I then informed them that I was doubling the $100,000 bequest to Clara, giving her $200,000 on the condition that she and her husband sign a permanent, legally binding waiver agreeing never to contest the will again and never to approach the company or me for financial assistance. The money wasn't a gift. It was a non-negotiable price for my peace and her silence. They hated it, but the sudden cash infusion was too tempting for their debt-ridden, bending lifestyle. They signed, the litigation evaporated. The true, satisfying revenge wasn't in rejecting the money, but in using it, and my father's final, venomous twist, to achieve total, definitive victory over my toxic family members. Over the next 5 years, I slowly transformed Sterling Robotics. I sold off some of the more ethically questionable manufacturing divisions, my father had valued most and invested heavily in employee benefits, arts initiatives, and sustainable technology. The company didn't just survive, it thrived. The disappointment, who wrote poetry and taught philosophy, turned out to be a better CEO than the ruthless industrialist who founded the company. I never became a corporate shark. I became a steward, using the wealth not for personal gain. I kept my small apartment and simply updated my car, but as a tool to improve the lives of the thousands of employees my father viewed merely as line items. I saw a final, faint smile in my father's action. He had finally admitted, in the only way he knew how, that the only person fit to lead was the one who valued something other than money. The plain tick, it was a symbolic gesture to get rid of me. The company was a symbolic challenge to test me. I passed the test, but I refused the humiliation. So that's the end of my story. I ended up running a multi-million-dollar corporation, not because I wanted to be rich, but because I was forced to protect a legacy from the very people my father thought were worthy of it. The ultimate irony is that by becoming the man my father hated, I fulfilled the one role he needed me to fill. I look back on that wedding day humiliation and realize it wasn't the end of my life. It was the unexpected beginning of a new one, where I finally had the power to define what success meant for me. Sterling name. Like this video, if you think my father's strange, final act was actually a twisted form of respect. Subscribe for more stories about inheritance battles, family drama, and unexpected success. And please, share your final thoughts on my decision to take the money and run the company in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.